Welcome to the Implementation Bootcamp on Helsinki. This is an introduction to the course that you'll be attending over a 5-day period. We'll be covering the first module of the course and will act as a prerequisite to attending day 1. A little bit about myself as a facilitator of this first module of Implementation Bootcamp. I'm a senior technical trainer and principal curriculum developer. That basically means that I deliver training and also write a lot of courses within the Education Services group. I currently do hold all the certifications that ServiceNow requires for us to do our job and be employed here. I've worked in the ITSM, ITAM, discovery, and automation product space for over 17 years, since the late 1990s. And previous employment was with New Horizons Computer Training Centers, Peregrine Systems, before it got purchased by or acquired by HP. From there, I moved on over to ServiceNow, and I've been here now since October 2011, so almost 5 years at this point. There was only 500 employees when I joined, and now we have over 4,000 in the middle of 2016. When I came over, I worked on this course, the Implementation Bootcamp, and we started numbering the courses. So in your welcome letter, you'll probably notice a class number. We used to deliver this class just once a month originally, or once a quarter, in fact. I think I came in October 2011. We had delivered the course 3 times, and it was being delivered once a quarter. Then it went to once a month, to once a week, and now several times a week around the world. We currently have over 13 wonderful instructors from all over the world. I can guarantee you, no matter what instructor you get, they will make your experience within the boot camp something that you will remember. Each of them are internal only. This is one of the only classes that we offer with only internal trainers. And we have instructors basically all over Europe. We have in Australia and APAC, including also India, and then we have trainers scattered around the US. This is also the only training that we have that's not delivered virtually. So all of our classes are in person because it's a very interactive training. I've also worked on the discovery, orchestration, and service mapping courses that Education Services offers. There are many instances that support our department, including an instance called K-Labs. So during your training, you're going to receive ServiceNow instances that are being provisioned from Amazon's cloud using ServiceNow software. And so that's being provisioned from a ServiceNow instance called K-Labs or Knowledge Labs, using our orchestration product and different APIs that connect into Amazon's web services environment. So I've been an integral part of working on that system, including taking various roles, everything from doing some of the technical work to also being the product owner and kind of defining needs and requirements in order for this system to be successful, not just for our internal training, but also for our partner training, because lots of partners leverage that system to deliver ServiceNow classes for themselves. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me, glenn.pinto@servicenow.com. And now I'd like to also introduce you to Robert Spencer, who will be assisting me as we cover Module 1.
Thank you, Glenn. My name is Robert Spencer. I'm also a senior technical trainer here at ServiceNow. I've been working here at ServiceNow for just about 3 years, where I've held training roles in a couple of different departments prior to coming to Education Services and delivering the customer-facing training. I was a senior technical trainer delivering training for the internal organization that included customer support and our developers. Over the years, I've worked within several roles within IT service management, IT asset management, and operational spaces. And I also have a background in delivering implementations across multiple products. I currently teach 6 courses here at ServiceNow, and I've been fortunate enough to teach on 4 different continents. The Implementation Bootcamp, I was lucky enough to teach one of the first classes, if not the first class, in Santiago, Chile, with the help of Deanna. My contact information is there at the bottom, robert.spencer@servicenow.com.
Prerequisites for this class include being a certified system administrator. This is ideally what you want to have. You do not want this class to be preferably your first ServiceNow experience in terms of a training. We know this is sometimes unavoidable for some of our internal new hires that have an onboarding program, and in some cases, just the way the scheduling happens, they end up in this class first. If you do end up in this class first, and this is your first experience, we do recommend that you look at some of the links that are available in the welcome letter from your instructor, they get some foundational understanding of how ServiceNow works. If you have no scripting background, it is recommended to go through some of the Code Academy's JavaScript courses that are available to you free of charge. This class is not entirely all around JavaScript, as we will be covering both soft skills and technical skills. We need to emphasize that up front, that the beginning portion of the class is more soft skills focused and the end of the class is more technical skill focused. If you want more technical skills, if you're from the technical side, you'll want to follow up this class with a scripting class, which we have also available. If you are more on the soft skills side and you are within ServiceNow, we do have some professional services engagement delivery courses, which will be more aligned with some of your job roles if you're on the engagement manager side. The class schedule will be defined in your welcome letter from your instructor, so depending where you're attending this class, it can start at 8:30. If you're in the US, it might start at a different time, so definitely make sure that you view that. We also do tend to end class a little bit early on Friday. It will depend on region, so often the instructor will have that in the welcome letter because the last day is maybe around working on an assessment, and it does tend to end a little bit earlier than the other 4 days. So when you get to class on day one, your instructor will go over the schedule, but just to give you a short introduction to what you'll be covering during the training, day one will include the sales phase, but basically a review of what you'll be covered in this recording. So they'll review what is why ServiceNow and Start Now methodology, but then you'll get into the meat of the course, which is covering the different phases of Start Now. We'll talk about what Start Now is as you get through this introduction piece in Module 1. Basically, Start Now is made up of multiple phases, and those are called Plan, Discover, Prepare, Deploy, and Operate. And so we're going to really take you through the Start Now methodology, which is ServiceNow's implementation methodology for successful go-lives of ServiceNow. So we'll cover things like team setup, we'll explore the Start Now application, we'll even have each of you be part of a team and run a kickoff meeting. We'll then look at how to gather and write stories within ServiceNow. Some of the key elements, such as a description of the story, acceptance criteria. We'll get into preparing for the deployment. So we'll look at sprint planning, how to prioritize stories, how to have well-defined acceptance criteria, how to assign stories to team members. We'll look at core system setup, such as setting up banners and working with reports and home pages. We'll look at VPN, when to use it and when to not. We'll then get into more technical aspects of working with integrations such as LDAP and single sign-on, both single sign-on and multi-factor single sign-on. We'll look at security, access controls, how to build access controls. You touch upon those in system administration training, but we're going to go deeper into understanding how those work and secure a system. We'll do web services integrations as well and make SOAP calls, both from a consuming side and a publishing side. And you'll also work with REST. On your fourth day, normally on a Thursday, you'll work as teams on something called the mini implementation. This is a really fun day where you will be working against a series of stories and kind of managing a mini implementation which lasts about 90 minutes in terms of a sprint time, and you'll try to work through 1 or 2 sprints depending on time. That will take the majority of Thursday. We'll also cover towards the end of Thursday how you clone instances, the whole instance clone process and what's involved with that. And then we'll actually talk about go live, some of the key things, the checks and balances that you want to do before any successful go live. And we'll also do a performance review and understand some of the things that could affect performance of a ServiceNow instance. On the very last day, you will be tested on your knowledge. It'll be a 2-part assessment, one part being made up of multiple choice questions and the second part being made up of a 3.5-hour hands-on assessment where you will be working through 10 requirements. This is a great way for you to kind of test your technical skills, and also the multiple choice will test your kind of theory skills on everything that you learned up to this point. So with that short introduction, let's go and start into the sales phase, and we'll cover Module 1, Why ServiceNow, and also cover a basic understanding of the Start Now methodology. We hope you enjoyed this training, and good luck in your experience within the Implementation Bootcamp. Welcome to the sales stage, Module 1 of Implementation Bootcamp. In the sales stage, we're going to cover 2 main modules, Why ServiceNow and Start Now Methodology Overview. And then we'll look at what's next in the following module. So a lot of our customers move over to ServiceNow because of two main things. We are modernizing and also transforming their entire IT service delivery model. A lot of us have worked with some legacy vendors in the past where you had client-server type environments. You were responsible for all the daily backups and high availability and so forth. And often those systems were very legacy looking. Some of them were 20 years old. But here we provide with ServiceNow a cloud delivery model. We basically maintain all of your servers and your entire data stack. Everything is maintained by our data centers. And they're also, as we'll learn later on, they are paired in our data centers. It means the data is actually replicated automatically to another data center. We have an intuitive usability environment. Basically, the UI is like nothing else. Very often, I know, Robert, when you go into some websites, you say, when you try to right-click on something, you expect to see like show matching or filter out, and it's not there, right? So people just love our interface the way it's set up. We also have a single system of record. We have now 30 plus applications all kind of talking to the same database. So when you have users that are working in the PPM application versus the incident application, they're the same user stack. We also have an extensible platform, one that you can build your own custom applications on. And a large percentage of our customers are now doing that and removing old legacy applications and moving it onto the platform. We can consumerize, so we're providing a very user experience. Uber and those type of applications are very friendly in the way that consumers of those applications work with it. And so we're trying to modernize the applications in ServiceNow so that that same kind of experience is felt with enterprise apps, which are really lacking that type of friendly user environment. And automation is huge. Any kind of task which is manual, we're trying to replace with automation. So not all clouds are created equal. You'll see that ServiceNow is up there in the enterprise cloud. There's also department clouds and consumer clouds. I think most of us are familiar with consumer clouds. I know you check your Facebook every day, Robert.
Any chance that I get.
And what happens if Facebook goes down?
Facebook goes down, then I guess it's time to get back to work.
Exactly.
Same with LinkedIn.
All right. So basically, the world's not going to come to an end if Facebook goes down.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So that's a whole different world, right? LinkedIn, YouTube, Google. If ServiceNow or Amazon Web Services, these enterprise type clouds go down, it can bring down an entire company's operations. Amazon might be storing your Active Directory server or SQL database, and if it goes down, people can't log into their systems. ServiceNow basically might be the system of record for everything: incident, change, problem, project. HR might be dependent on it, or facilities. And basically, ServiceNow going down is not a good day.
Not at all.
So in terms of the cloud providers like ServiceNow, what we need in the back end to make sure that we have the highest uptime is a very robust data center environment, which we're going to talk about later on, how we have backups and paired data centers and so forth. And also in the middle, we have departmental clouds, which you might be more familiar with. These don't usually span the entire enterprise, but they are localized to an individual department. So again, it is not a good day if any of these departmental clouds go down, but it's not the end of the day.
Correct. It's going to be the end of the day for a particular department, maybe travel or HR that we see, or maybe even sales that we see in these examples here.
Absolutely. Enterprise service model. So this is really interesting where we have a requester and a provider. You might recall using an Uber or a Lyft type of application in the past where you basically have a catalog of services. That's your service taxonomy. You have Uber X now and Uber XL. Uber Pool is now another type of service. You have the service experience, which is you using the application and where you can basically just click in one place and all of a sudden a driver shows up at your door in about 2 or 3 minutes. You have the service delivery, that experience of actually having the ride, where now a lot of the Uber drivers, I don't know about you, I got water.
I got water and breath mints as well. I didn't know if that was a sign, but yeah, they had that. They had Wi-Fi as well.
Oh, did they? Yeah. So there's some really neat things in the service delivery side of Uber. And then you have service assurance, and that's really that little 5-star rating that you give to your driver at the end. And then Uber obviously has analytics and all of that. They can report on all the drivers that are 4-star or higher, or any of those drivers. You got a 2-star when you were doing Uber, right?
I did not. I might have given 2 stars, but I didn't get one. But that is another side of that. They do rate the passengers as well.
Yeah, so the passengers can absolutely rate, so you know what you're getting. It actually shows you the star on the app itself.
And to continue with the Uber example, within this service analytics, Uber sends out a monthly report based on your travels and the ratings that you provided to the drivers that you have. So they have some analytics, and again, that's on a monthly basis. And it has some metrics in there based on how many rides, how much time I saved by taking Uber, and the amount of miles that I traveled, and where I stand based on others within the organization that take Uber as well.
Wow. Yeah, so I mean, that's what our consumers are used to, right? And then you go to work, you go to these modern buildings, they have these amazing lobbies and so forth, and you work with archaic type of software.
Right. There's been no development effort at all.
Exactly. Until ServiceNow.
Until ServiceNow.
So this whole experience from requester to provider, we're not only bringing it into the IT department, we're bringing it into other departments, because there might be many times you interact with HR or facilities, and right now you generally have to interact with an email, right? Or you have to call them up, but there's not kind of like a taxonomy of services that these organizations provide. And if they do provide it, you might request something and you have no visibility as to anyone's even looking at your request.
Correct.
So that whole service experience is very horrible, and there's no assurance that you're ever going to get anything back. So ServiceNow has the model of a service catalog. You have a modern environment that you can request services. You have service delivery where you have the provider on the back end, and automation that's letting you know where you are. So if you're waiting for an approval or something like that, and approval occurs, you'll get an automatic email that approval is now taken place. Also on the marketing side or the finance side, they have service assurance, so there's SLAs. So if there's an open task in someone's inbox, it could be escalated to their manager if it's not dealt with in a timely manner. And of course, those managers can overlook everything that's in the platform through robust reporting. All right, so what does ServiceNow's cloud look like? Well, first of all, we start with a robust platform, and that's really how ServiceNow started 10 years ago. It was just a platform, no applications whatsoever. We tried to sell it as a platform, in fact. That's what Fred Luddy's goal was, except people were like, this is a great platform, but what can I do with it? Right?
And the answer was anything you want.
Yeah, and that was not a good answer. Even though it sounds very flexible, customers wanted to see examples, really like templates, so to speak. And so since Fred Luddy came from the service management world, he started building some of the ITIL applications, such as incident, problem, change, and so forth, on top of the platform. And then we started selling those applications, and then customers were able to configure them very easily, and they were able to build additional applications as well. But you'll notice what the platform actually has. It has things like workflow, a robust CMDB. It has security built into it, reporting. It has that user experience we talked about. It has a workflow engine, a notification, a knowledge base. So a lot of great things. So if you build your own application as a customer, you access all of these platform features. And then what are the applications we have now? We used to just have incident, problem, and change back in the day, but now we are made up of just a number of applications from all walks of life within the enterprise. And so these are the service management applications. You can see the ITIL apps, plus we have finance, facilities, HR, and so forth. We also have business management applications, such as vendor management, demand management, financial management, and our last portion of the pie here is our ITOM applications in terms of cloud management, where you can provision VMs, event management, where we can consolidate events coming in from multiple monitoring tools. We have orchestration, service mapping, and also discovery.
And as you mentioned, Glenn, that it's a very dynamic platform, and then we built some applications. And what customers have done is they've created their own custom applications. And there's a couple of different areas of where these can be posted, these can be purchased. And one of these areas is the ServiceNow store. And the ServiceNow store is where you can try applications out there. And these are provided by a third-party vendor. And one of the benefits of having it within the ServiceNow store is that these are validated. So these are going to be validated for the current release in terms of security, integration, functionality, etc. And there's also the ServiceNow Share. And the ServiceNow Share is going to be some custom applications that are being shared by developers, peers, in the form of an update set. And lastly, we have the Custom App Showcase.
Robert, why don't we just go there and show them?
That's a great idea, Glenn.
So if you want to know about all the different applications our customers build, just take a look at this. Unbelievable. Look, we have customers building their own appointment booking applications, telecom expense management, customer care self-service portals. This is an amazing showcase of what customers have actually done.
What's common about all of these apps in the showcase here is that each one has a description of the application, really the purpose. It also shows what challenges that this application is going to address, and also the value that's going to be added from using this application.
So yeah, it's a wonderful site. So definitely if you're into custom applications or want to see if you can sunset or get ideas about different applications, this is a great site to go to. So on an earlier section, we talked about an enterprise cloud and how important it is to have uptime. Well, part of that is our data centers that are staged all around the world. You'll notice they're down in South America, all over North America, Europe, and also Australia, and even Asia. And they are all paired data centers. So even though we have 16 data centers, they're basically have sister data centers. So we have East and West Coast kind of paired data centers in the United States. So our customers will always have data redundancy and high availability set up automatically. In addition, on the East Coast of the United States, we have what are called FSMA data centers, and these are data centers that meet higher standards in order to support our federal customers.
And continuing on with the talk about data centers, this is a look at the advanced high availability model that we have in order to ensure that we keep the amount of uptime that we do, really leading the pack in enterprise service management. And this is a look on the left side here at before high availability. This is where the ServiceNow customer would access the instance through their firewall. What's not pictured here is a load balancing that's going to happen to create that connection from the DNS from Data Center 1 and 2. Data Center 1 in these apps, these are essentially application servers or nodes, what they're called. And depending on the size of the customer is going to depend on the number of nodes that are going to be in each data center. As you'll notice on Data Center 2, there's a series of nodes here as well. This is what's called the secondary data center, where the passive database and the backup is going to reside here. Back in Data Center 1, we see that all of the nodes point to the active database where the read-write capabilities are happening. And there's also going to be a backup here. Bin logging, because we're using MySQL when we are housed within one of our data centers. MySQL is the database, and it's performing a bin log replication that's happening in near real time, so that in the event high failover or after a failure in the data center, hardware, etc. On the right is what we're looking at after the failover, in that there will be a DNS redirect. What was the secondary becomes the primary data center, and the primary becomes the secondary.
So even as we do have high availability in our data centers, a lot of folks get a little confused as to why do we also have backups. Well, the data is not truly backed up with high availability. What it is that all data is replicated. So if you end up doing a mass delete of everything in your database in Data Center 1, then all of your data is going to be replicated, or all your non-data is going to be replicated to the other data center as well. So that doesn't really help you if you have some kind of catastrophe with your data. So we do perform daily backups. They usually occur in the middle of the night, and they do a 24-hour backup, so from the previous backup. And we do daily backups for a week, and then we do weekly backups once a week for 4 weeks. So we keep basically up to 4 weeks worth of data. And on our daily backups, we don't do a full backup, but we do like incremental backups that occur. With the backups, before, when we had a single data center, prior to our paired data centers, we used to have to do the backup, and then that backup had to be taken off-site. Right? So that was an important piece of the puzzle, because if something went bad in that data center, then the backup would be lost as well. So the backup actually had to be kept up off-site. Now we actually do backups of the Data Center 1 and also Data Center 2. So truly, Data Center 2's backup is off-site to Data Center 1. And so this is one key thing that we do very well, having to manage our data centers for our customers, something that our customers really struggle with. Very often they don't have good backup strategy, they don't have good high availability standards. Just think of your own personal computer, right? A lot of people will not have anything backed up, or if they do back it up, they'll back it up to a hard disk, and they'll stick the hard disk on top of their laptop.
And it all gets wet and all the data's gone.
It's all gone. So you would have a robust environment if somehow everything you typed into your computer were replicated to another computer in another part of the country, preferably, because what happened if a hurricane hits the West Coast? It could wipe out your neighbor's house, right? Or a fire could as well. So that's what we do, and that's why our customers really can trust in data center environments that we have set up, including our backups. So I love this slide because it really does kind of set ServiceNow apart from the rest of the cloud vendors that are out there. even if we look at our departmental cloud vendors like Salesforce or Concur versus even an Amazon, which is an enterprise cloud, we have total availability uptime very high. And that's because of the number of paired data centers we have. That's one of the reasons. So when one of our customers' equipment has to be patched or has to be upgraded, we can simply flip them over from data center 1 to data center 2 to their sister instance, in essence, and then we can work on that other system. So that's one key reason. The other reason is we are set up with a single versus multi-tenant environment. And that's kind of a key understanding, is that every customer has their own database for their own instance. That means their database might live with other databases on the same server, but they have their own database. So there's no commingling of data for one thing. But because they have their own database, we have full control over that database, and we can flip them over from one instance to another without having to affect other customers. So in a multi-tenant environment, all customers are sharing the same database, also the same hardware. So if we have to bring down that type of customer, all the customers are brought down simultaneously. So you can see that planned maintenance is much, much higher, like in a Workday or Salesforce versus ServiceNow, where 6 hours is really much, much less. And so that really drives up our average uptime of almost 100%.
And this is the real availability dashboard. And I remember that when this came out, maybe it was 2 years ago. Time's going by pretty quickly here, but this was really a first where ServiceNow is showing transparency into the instance availability for customers. And when customers see this, they didn't even know at times when there were outages within their instances. So what this is showing here is production and sub-prod or non-production instances, and we have availability listed for all of these. Each one of these areas here are called chiclets, and what these chiclets represent are the previous 90 days. And hovering over one of these that are in amber or a yellow color here indicate that there were 0 to 10 minutes impact. 10 plus minutes of impact are highlighted in red. And when you hover over these, it will provide the incident and the start and end time, as well as how long the impact was. You click on open issues, that will show the open issues for this specific customer. And on the right, it's showing the actual real production availability.
Chiclets. That's why you're always chewing gum, I guess, huh?
You know why now.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, this really is a first in terms of visibility. No one else in the industry has this. And you'll notice where it says open issues in the upper left. So it's a nice feature to have, that customers really have full visibility into what we're offering them in terms of our service.
And customers have actually contacted us to see if they could use these. We've got managed service providers out there that would like to show a similar type of dashboard to their customers. So I think that may still be a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. So any customer or partner that has an instance with ServiceNow, you can access through Hi, correct? It's through Hi?
Right. There's a self-service homepage within Hi that has this dashboard as part of that.
Yep. Because ServiceNow is the custodian of our customers' data, and right now we have almost 4,000 customers, right? It's unbelievable. I just noticed that for every employee we add a customer.
I think they'd like that idea. Yeah, new logos, land and expand.
That's pretty good. So you are actually worth one customer, Robert.
Well, great. I'll remember that in my next review discussion.
So that's good to know. But yeah, so security is paramount. And we don't just have a secure product in terms of the product itself, the fact that it actually works and does what it's supposed to. So that's all due to our amazing development team that we have. But where the data is actually stored in our data centers, they go through rigorous schedules and demands of how secure they are. Everything from a barbed wire fence around the data center to a security guard at the front door. These are all
retinal scans.
Yeah, right. All those type of things are part of the actual data centers and make up the ISO standards. We also have third-party penetration testing to see whether we can be hacked into our data centers, and so we work with companies like White Hat and so forth, where they're constantly testing for vulnerabilities based on what they're learning out there on the internet. They kind of specialize in those type of security penetration testing. And then we have event monitoring that's happening. We have vulnerability scanning. So security is huge. We do far more than our average customer would ever do with their own customer environments because we are the custodians of customer data and because we do this for a living.
And this is an overview of our release cycle. And our release cycle, where we see feature release 1, is a main feature release that are named after major cities across the country. Years ago, when ServiceNow first started, there were 2 releases a year. There was a spring release and a fall release.
Yeah, they named it based on the seasons.
Right, based on the seasons, fall 2011, spring 2011. And as we continue to grow and expand across the globe as an organization, having 2 releases based on the time of year didn't really work well, because right now in the southern hemisphere it's summertime, in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere it's wintertime. So there wasn't really a way to sync this up. So the method or the model that they've gone to for feature releases is that these are named alphabetically after major cities. The current release now is Helsinki. The previous release was Geneva. The I release is going to be Istanbul once we move to that, and it's going to have all the fixes and all the features. New features going to be introduced in those releases. We also have patch releases and we have hot fixes. And patch releases are different in that they do not include new features, but it's going to include all of the previous hot fixes in that particular release. And we also have hot fixes as well. And hot fixes are going to be customer specific, and they may or may not include previous fixes for a given release, but they're going to address a specific problem for a customer. And looking at the patch release and the feature release, we can get this information from the statistics page by appending stats.do or going to the stats module within the platform. I think it may be a good idea to show that, Glenn. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do that. So Robert, I've logged into a Helsinki instance, and what I can do is up in this filter navigation field, I can type in stats.do and hit enter, and then it will give me the statistics page you were talking about. And from here we can notice that it says Glide Helsinki, has a date, and it says patch 1 right there. Doing a command plus sign to make the screen a little bit larger for those people over 50.
Or over 40.
Or over 40, yeah. Exactly. So this is a good place to go. So you're saying that this patch 1 includes all the hot fixes, right? Included prior to this patch.
Prior to this patch, right.
Yeah.
If there are any from patch 0, it would be cumulative.
Yeah, so hot fixes are customer-specific. Patches are then a way of rolling out all those hot fixes to multiple customers. So you can upgrade from patch to patch. And there are some mandatory patch upgrades, because we do find, through the vulnerability testing we just talked about earlier on, we might find potential breaches in security. We do security fixes, and then those are rolled into the patches, and then we kind of mandate certain customers or all customers to be at certain patch levels, really for their own benefit.
Right, and that's on a quarterly basis, right? I believe that's the quarterly patch program.
Yeah, there's a certain
for that.
Exactly. So there's a certain patch that our customers have to be on, and that's really for their benefit. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of some of the benefits of ServiceNow, covering our data centers, our security concerns that we cover and we worry about, so our customers don't have to, including our paired data centers and so forth. Well, next going to look at our Start Now methodology. And this is an important area of our professional services organization in order to drive consistent engagements with our customers. So taking the best practices from all our years of experience and kind of driving them into a methodology known as Start Now. So we'll look at that next. So Robert, I know you are wondering what Start Now stood for.
I was wondering what Start Now stood for, but I see here it stands for Strategic Alignment and Rapid Transformation.
Absolutely. So that's really where it got its word START from, the acronym that falls into that. And you'll notice also that Start Now is made up of many phases. And our Implementation Bootcamp class is going to go through these various phases. So we're just going to touch upon them in this introduction on Start Now. But the whole class is basically built around these phases and what occurs in each phase. So we have the plan phase, discover, prepare, deploy, operate, and then transformation, which really starts the whole process over again. To understand or remember these phases, some people think of PD, PDO as one way, but these are the phases we'll be looking into. And again, this is just a bundle of best practices that have occurred through the years. If you've done implementations well, and next time you improve upon them, and then you get somebody that's brand new, how do you teach them what has worked in the past, right? ServiceNow used to be made up of 3 or 4 consultants, so they used to do it pretty consistently, and they learned from it, and they could share information very easily. But as we started onboarding new partners and we started hiring technical consultants from the field, it became where people were just emailing, well, do this, do that, and it was just not a scalable model. So they basically put together a team, and they said, let's look at the best things that make our implementations most successful, and let's wrap them into an application, and that's what StartNow is. So StartNow is a methodology built by ServiceNow for ServiceNow engagement. So that's important. What we do, though, is we do have different types of deals, right? Some that are occurring by ServiceNow-led type deals. We might have partner-led deals. We might have ServiceNow engagement managers that are managing either our partner engagements or maybe our ServiceNow engagements. So this slide is really kind of covering the different scenarios and when StartNow is available and when and what type. So StartNow used to be only installed at a customer site on a customer instance. And basically what it is an application made up of our STLC, Software Development Lifecycle module, including a project management application, and they just bundled it and customized it and configured it with attachments and documents and stories and a whole bunch of feature functionality to kind of drive an engagement. And so that's really what the StartNow application is, and we'll look at that more in detail in a little while. But that application was an update set in essence, and it was able to be installed on a customer dev instance or prod instance, what have you. It was not available to our partners. It isn't available to our partners still because it is really ServiceNow collateral. However, you can see that if the deal is on ServiceNow paper and we're using a ServiceNow engagement, we have to use StartNow. So that's how we drive in ServiceNow our engagements to be consistent using StartNow. But we can't mandate that for our partners, and a lot of partners have their own engagement methodology. So what they do is you'll learn about StartNow in this class, even though you're a partner, because you might be on a ServiceNow engagement. And so that's kind of crucial why we're teaching you about StartNow here. If you are a partner and you hire an engagement manager from ServiceNow, then there is an option to use a centralized version of StartNow. This is where it's actually installed on a domain-separated environment. And so that is an option that would be in those type of engagements. And then if it's a partner type deal with no ServiceNow engagement manager, then StartNow is currently not available to our partners. So in the implementation bootcamp, we are really going to cover everything that happens from a signed SOW, a statement of work, all the way to go live. That's really kind of the focus of this class, or the bookends of the class. So there are some pre-sales type of activities that occur. There's even pre-engagement activities, and that's where the plan phase sort of starts. Really, the signed SOW, and then what we have within 30 days of a signed SOW, we have something called a kickoff meeting. I mean, it's really where we meet the customer. Resources are being assigned to the project. Those resources could be partner-based or they could be ServiceNow. Well, obviously they are going to be ServiceNow, but in some cases we might have an engagement manager with just partner resources depending on what we have available. And then we kind of move through the entire engagement as we'll learn what these phases are through the plan, discover, prepare, deploy, and operate stage. And it's really kind of like the pre-engagement to engagement, which is kind of the guts of the engagement, to post-engagement, which is really kind of the go-live events, the UAT testing, kind of making sure everything's ready for go-live. There's some key meetings that take place, obviously, or key milestones such as the contract close, that's really the signed SOW, to the kickoff meeting, which occurs in the plan phase, to where we kind of evaluate the engagement in the closeout meeting.
And through the pre-engagement, engagement, and post-engagement phases, these are the 5 stages within the StartNow methodology. There's essentially a 6th stage called transformation, which is a post-implementation stage that essentially we don't really cover here in the course, but it really is a long-term continual service improvement program that's part of this. It all starts off with the planning stage, where, Glenn, you had mentioned that we have the official kickoff meeting after we have the statement of work established. We'll set up the teams. We'll be doing some workshop planning. And what's going to come out of that is that we're going to go into the discover phase. And from the discover phase stage, I should say, is where we have the requirements workshop. We're documenting stories at this point where we are taking a delta between what the customer's requirements are and baseline functionality within the platform. And then from there, we move to the prepare stage, where we're actually starting to do some of the sprint work. And we'll talk about what sprints and releases are, but we'll do some scrum planning, release planning, and security and compliance. So we want to have those groups up front that are going to help and be responsible for this project being successful, and security is one of those. It's really never too early to get security involved.
Yeah, and in prepare, try to think of it as like there's common things that happen in every engagement.
Things like integrations and things, I would imagine.
Yeah, integrations or your LDAP configuration to get your user data in, single sign-on. You might have web services integrations, right? So all those type of things are really kind of VPN set up for security, as you mentioned before. So these are things not necessarily part of the sprint per se, but things that are going to happen on every engagement. And so we try to cover that in this particular phase.
How about the deploy stage?
Well, the deploy stage is where we get into our actual sprints themselves. So in the prepare stage, we're doing sprint planning. We're deciding which functionality do we want to build out and when. And that's where we go through a series with the product owners. We'll talk about the different roles and people involved in the teams, both on the customer side and on the ServiceNow side and partner side even. But we go through planning sprints. And that's where our functionality is actually being built in a series of sprints. They're usually about 2 weeks in length. And those sprints are comprised in a release, and the release is really your entire release. So from trying to drive a go live date. So that's where we have our release end date. And in the deploy phase is really where we're doing the work, right? That's where we're working through the sprints, where we're building functionality. That functionality is captured in what we call a story. So we use something called Agile or Scrum, as we're going to learn in this class as well. And those stories really are made up of really a description of the requirement, why we're building that requirement out, and then acceptance criteria, which is when is this requirement actually finished? When is it complete? So we'll learn all about that, and these are kind of like key pieces that we'll talk about throughout the whole class. And then lastly, we move into operate.
And operate, you mentioned the user acceptance testing. So this is where that validation is going to occur from the end of that sprint when we're running in from the deploy stage here. So we'll do that validation in terms of the update sets. So all the customizations that we've made have been captured. So we'll validate that those update sets are functional, and they'll be able to move from our production or dev instance into our production environment. The user training, so we want to make sure that the users are trained, they understand, and there's communication that goes out that they're going to be standing up ServiceNow, and that will also be part of the go live and the go live checklist that the engagement managers that will be using to follow up and to make sure that each one of these tasks within the operate stage is completed.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So you'll notice it says on the front and plan phase, it talks about customer training, and then in the operate stage, it talks about user training. So when we talk about customer training in the plan stage, we're really looking for system administrators on the customer side that are going to work side by side with our partners and our technical consultants in order to become enabled on the ServiceNow platform. So when they do go live, that they have people that are enabled to be able to support the product. So that's kind of a key piece. So that's part of our methodology, is having customer sysadmins working side by side with our delivery people. And so in order to enable them up front, we do expect them to go through some basic training that's provided by ServiceNow. On the other side of the avenue, we have the operate say we have this user training. Those are really the users of the system. So we talk about like the mechanics, right? Those are like the sysadmins, and then we have the drivers. Those are drivers of a car. Those are like the users. We call them fulfillers. And that training means, well, now we have a new system in order to work through incidents, problems, service catalog, knowledge. How do you use this system? And so these are what we call fulfillers. And we also provide in ServiceNow something called fulfiller training. And that's run by our organization. And so that's a key piece that the customer may elect to do on their own, or they might engage with ServiceNow in order to do that fulfiller training.
I have been fortunate enough to deliver fulfiller training.
Oh, did you?
That was a very nice experience.
Yeah, yeah, they're usually short in duration, and they're non-technical, right?
Right, a couple of days just showing their staff on how to use the platform and how it's going to support their processes as well.
And it is customized, right? Because the user training is really about how the customers implemented ServiceNow. So you had to be very intimate with the process and how their instance of ServiceNow was working.
Very much so. Had to learn their processes, the different roles that were there, and also how to deliver the training on their platform.
Yeah, and we do it on application by application. So we deliver fulfiller training, whether it be an instant release, or whether it be change, or whether it be any of the products that we offer. So how do you access Start Now? If you are an engagement manager working for ServiceNow, then you are responsible really of driving that project through the Start Now application. So there are some options on the services portal. So in the notes, you'll actually see the link to the website or the ServiceNow instance that you would have to log into. And from there, there's a service catalog, right, where you have an option as a new customer partner domain. You can set it up in a domain centralized environment on that instance itself, or you can install Start Now onto a customer instance using one of our products that actually will install the data packs onto the customer instance itself.
With the centralized Start Now, what it does is it allows, if you can imagine being an engagement manager and you're managing multiple projects and you've got a local instance installed on each one of these projects, that would be a lot of overhead in order to manage your projects and even do any type of analytics against all of those. What the centralized portion does, centralized Start Now does, is provide visibility into multiple projects in one interface. So that is obviously
a key benefit.
A huge benefit in this case for the EMs.
Plus, we're not leaving anything on the customer instance as well in terms of Start Now. There are some customers that don't necessarily want that installed on their system. There's also licensing issues because Start Now is made up of SDLC and Project, but if the customer hasn't purchased those, then they're actually, when we leave the engagement, we have to deal with some kind of post-engagement cleanup so that they were not being out of a breach of license. Right. So there were issues that occurred in that scenario. So we do have two options now. Some of our customers, we do have local installs, but we also are really preferring this centralized environment. So what do you get with Start Now? Basically, it's made up of three distinct areas. One is a Scrum environment. That's really kind of where we're working through the stories within sprints, within a defined release. There's also a project plan or project management, which kind of maps out the high-level overall project. You think of a waterfall approach. We'll have milestones of when our sprints are going to start end and when our releases are going to drive towards. Also, any kind of meetings might be kind of mapped out in the project plan. And then we also have a section on RIDAC, which are just a place to kind of track all of our risks, issues, decisions that were made. So if we decided not to follow a certain recommendation or a decision was made to go with LDAP with non-VPN, there's just a place to kind of track all of that information within our RIDAC module.
Now, are these plugins that are enabled? If this were a local installation of Start Now, these were the plugins that you were referring to that the customer may have licensing issues with once we're done?
Yeah, so it's a combination of update set and also plugins.
Okay.
So the actual Agile is really the SDLC application, Project is the PPM application, and RIDAC is actually a custom application that's part of the Start Now application. So we actually don't have a baseline application called RIDAC, but it's actually a custom app that's built as part of the Start Now app.
Okay.
So one of the key pieces of the implementation is obviously the Scrum element of the engagement. That's where we're actually doing the work, right? A lot of it is planning up front and a lot of discussions of what functionality needs to be built, prioritizing that functionality so that they can meet kind of the budget and the dates of go live and so forth. But when we get down to it, eventually the work has to be done. And all that work is going to be captured or the work that needs to be done is going to be captured in something called a story. So that's in essence a requirement. Those stories may have tasks in order to kind of slice and dice them a little bit smaller and make them more incremental. But the stories are really kind of the pieces of functionality. These are what would be assigned to our partners or to our TCs in order to build something, whether it be build a certain homepage or build a report or build a custom form or build additional fields onto a form or build a workflow. These are all going to be captured in stories. These stories are going to be added into sprints. These are the time periods that the work has to be done. Usually 2 to 4 weeks is usually the length of a sprint. And your sprints are what comprise our release. So you might have release 1, release 2. So maybe you implement incident, problem, and change in release 1. And then you might implement discovery and seem to be potentially in release 2. And they're all tied to a product. So the product might be incident, problem, and change in terms of the actual products themselves. There are some other Scrum terms, in this case called an epic, and that's really, it's not a piece of functionality, it's a way of grouping like stories. So if a story is very large, you can break them down into smaller stories, and then you can kind of wrap them up into an epic. So if you have a whole bunch of integration type stories, you could have an epic called integration and then kind of tie them to that. So it's really for reporting purposes. If you want to know if a specific epic was complete or not, you can look at all the stories associated with it.
And so this looks like a particular epic can span across multiple sprints.
Yeah, that's also kind of key. Yeah, so the epic can span obviously multiple stories. That's the whole point. But an epic could expand across multiple sprints. So maybe there are stories that make up a piece of functionality that are going to take beyond just the 2 to 4 weeks period of a sprint. So yes. So just kind of looking at this again, that story, Robert, when we think about stories, these are the requirements, right? You talked about the requirements workshop, process workshops. These are where stories are going to be written and starting to be formed, right?
Correct.
And that's known as our product backlog. So we don't want to limit a story, even if it's out of scope. We might still write it down because that might kind of drive a second phase implementation. So we don't want to be limited in terms of the stories that we write. And any story that's written is kind of what we consider a product backlog. It's part of the product backlog. Once a story is added and it's prioritized to be worked on, it will be added to a sprint. And that then becomes part of the sprint backlog.
Okay.
And because the sprint is associated to a release, it will also be part of the release backlog. Right? So these are kind of the way things are linked. And within the Start Now application, as you start working through, you'll see how all of these relationships can occur. So there's always clear visibility to all the stories that we have, what stories have been worked on, where are they in progress, have they been canceled, or have they been completed? So there's great visibility, and that can be seen both from the customer side. All the team members that are part of the sprint can also see the states of the stories, and so the customer has clear visibility on a daily basis.
So what we have here is the Start Now project plan, and what we're looking at is really high-level visibility into the project itself. So we're looking at milestones of this project, and we're looking at the project tasks that are associated with this. So this is kind of the waterfall as we were looking at here. And if we look under the project task, we see each one of these tasks are going to correspond to the Start Now stages. So again, here we're looking at high-level milestones for the planning stage. Have we got all of the members accountable for the kickoff meetings that we're going to have? The discover phase, discover stage. Do we have our stories? Do we have the product owners available? Do we have the workshops scheduled? And so we're looking at all those milestones here again from a high level point of view, looking at the project portion of this. And this project workbench is what's going to be included when the project plugin is enabled within the platform.
Exactly. So this is just, again, when we talked about those 3 pieces of Start Now, talked about the Agile piece, the project piece, and Ridac. This is the project piece, and this is actually built on our PPM application. Again, that third tier of Start Now is the Ridac module. This is pretty self-explanatory in terms of what you track in there, but instead of having to track it in an Excel spreadsheet or in an email or a Word document or a SharePoint, built into Start Now, there is a Ridac module which allows you basically tag different items and decisions that occur throughout the project. So there's always going to be risks that occur, potential issues that arise, decisions that are being made, action items that are being taken place, or changes. Change of scope is kind of a big one where we could get into scope creep, or we have to put in a change order, a change of scope just due to either lack of knowledge on the customer side as to what they were getting, or just loving the platform so much that they want to add additional functionality and they're willing to pay and purchase additional hours. So Ridac is kind of that unique module that we can perform all of this tracking. So this is a list of the different phases and kind of a list also of some of the key items that happen in each phase. So when we think about plan, what we're really doing is meeting with the customer, making sure that we know each other, we have the kickoff meeting, we understand how the projects are being tracked. We also have to make sure that we have kind of this overall project plan. When is our go-live date? How do we know the go-live date? Well, that's going to come down to the number of applications that are being purchased, the number of applications that are expected to be implemented, how configurable those applications are. So in part of the initial scoping that our teams do, we try to determine how baseline is this customer looking to be.
As well as resources. Our resources are a part of that as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. If we only have one resource assigned versus 10 for the same kind of project scope, then obviously the timeline would be crunched.
Right.
So we have something called a pricing calculator. That's all done once the signed SOW once the signed SOW is done, we do that pricing calculator beforehand, because that's kind of what drives the price of the SOW. And so from that, we have these folks that go out and basically try to scope out the project, and they have some initial discussions with the customer. They try to understand what they have today, what they're looking to do in the future with ServiceNow, and they want to see how complex is that implementation. So we actually rate that implementation from kind of like basic to intermediate to complex, and that kind of weights the number of hours it should take. Because we have a pretty good idea how long incident management should be configured and take to implement at any customer. But if a customer is highly configured, it's going to take longer. And then based on the number of resources we have, the time it takes can be longer or shorter, just like you mentioned. Discover, that's where we're kind of really getting into the details of those requirements that are making up that basic or intermediate or complex implementation. And we're kind of outputting all those stories, which are the requirements. Prepare stage, we're organizing the sprints based on the timelines that we have. And we're also adding the stories that we want to build out in those sprints, at least into the first sprint. So we work with the product owner from the customer side to help understand that, what's the most important functionality we get out first, and what needs to be prioritized at the top of the list. And then the deploy phase, that's when all the Scrum activities occur, where we're actually building functionality, where we're writing code, where we're building configurations or building applications, what have you. And then the operate phase is where we are actually testing that functionality that's built and preparing for go live. Everyone loves graphics, right, Robert?
They do.
So this is really trying to show you what's happening over the course of the engagement, right? And this is really beyond after the kickoff meeting has actually occurred. We're starting to actually get some stories that's forming that product backlog that we talked about earlier on. We have just stories. They might have come from the process workshops. They may have come from the requirements workshops. The product owners are kind of key pieces of the puzzle. They're going to help drive, right? Rank those stories in terms of importance as to which ones actually have to be built and then will be added to the sprint backlog. And so that's our team. Once we have that sprint backlog and we get into the deploy phase, that's when we have our partners, we have our technical consultants from ServiceNow all working on that backlog over that 2 to 4 week period, as you can see, in order to complete it. Now, you'll see there's a daily stand-up. What do you know about a daily stand-up?
No, the daily stand-up should be brief and to the point. To the point in terms of, what are you working on? Are there any roadblocks, and what you worked on yesterday? Maybe not in that order, but those are the 3 topics that you want to cover in those daily stand-up meetings.
Absolutely. And we do that in all of our engagements. We have something called daily stand-ups. You'll be lucky enough to do them in our class as well. You'll be going through a daily stand-up when you work through your mini implementation on Thursday of training. And basically, like Robert said, you're going to be covering kind of making sure that the project's on scope, right? It's on task. And it's a way of kind of touching base with all the team members. And you have this person called the Scrum Master. They're the one sort of leading it. That Scrum Master could be the product owner from the customer side, but more likely it's the engagement manager on the ServiceNow side that's kind of leading that whole discussion. And at the very end, after the sprint is completed in that 2 to 4 week period, we usually allow time for what's called a team retrospective. This allows the team to say, how can we work better? What worked during that sprint? What could we do to improve? Were there communication blockages? Were you being assigned stories that you didn't really have the skill set for? Those kind of things. And so the team will work more efficiently going forward. And also you do a sprint review. That's actually showing the customer back all the functionality that you built over that sprint. And it's a way of really gauging that customer immediately to know what you're building is meeting their needs. Because in a waterfall approach, you might come back 6 months later and show functionality, and the customer is saying that's not at all what we wanted, right? So there's a lot of wasted work here. Here we can make small adjustments from sprint to sprint with that sprint review and make sure that we are actually on task based on what the customer is looking for. So here's a sample implementation schedule. You can see all of our implementations only take 12 weeks, right, Robert?
They're very efficient using this start now methodology.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think some implementations actually have occurred within 3 weeks, but we do have implementations that have taken over a year. There are customers that are consolidating like hundreds of different processes and applications and help desks, and those will take a much longer period of time. So this is not by any means saying that all our implementation is 12 weeks. But what are we seeing here, Robert?
What we're seeing is that this is these stages are very linear, and we see that in some cases here, when we start off the project through weeks 1 through 3, where we may have stages that are running in parallel. In this case, we could be planning while we're preparing and also moving into the discovery phase here. What we see here in the middle in terms of the deployment, and we see that these are essentially staggered, and these are going to be based on either the size of the implementation or if there are dependencies between sprint to sprint. Finally, we move into the operate stage as we start to move out. And again, we're doing a lot of some of the post work, the go live, or cutting cakes, going through the post go live checklist, and then finally into transformation and the continuing service improvement.
All right. And I guess that screenshot in the middle for deploy could be done in different ways, because this is assuming that there's one major release that's occurring for all products at the end of the release.
Right.
We could theoretically have multiple product owners kind of driving. One's driving incident release, one's driving a problem release, one's driving maybe a discovery release, and those could all be happening really in parallel. And they could all have different go-live dates and so forth. So it really kind of depends on the customer, the scope, how many product owners there are involved. We usually see in large customers that they might have multiple product owners for each that are a product specialty, and in smaller customers they might be just one product owner. So there's a lot of flexibility that happens there in that middle piece. So hopefully by now you know there is something called Start Now.
Yes, very familiar with Start Now, the methodology, and its origin.
Yeah, and we've showed you a lot of different graphics. It's just another way to slice and dice things that we've already talked about, but just kind of showing you that there are going to be non-technical activities that are going to happen over the entire project. So those might be meetings that are occurring, workshops that are occurring, those sort of things, milestones that are planned. And then, of course, we have the key ingredient of deploy, which are all the technical activities, right? That's everything to do with your sprint planning to actually building out the stories themselves. And then you have, tracking any kind of RIDAC type activities in your RIDAC module. And over to the left, it just shows you kind of the people that really are concerned with the different aspects. So project management, most of the TCs aren't concerned when a meeting is scheduled, right? They might be invited, but they're not really the one planning it. But your engagement managers, your customer product managers, they might be highly involved. And so the project management application is kind of responsible. It's important for them because if they have to report back to any stakeholders, they can use their project management app to kind of talk about key milestones. But all the Scrum activities, that's crucial to our TCs. Right, all the process owners, the customer product owners, that the stories that need to be worked on are being worked on. The EM is kind of managing that whole process. And then we have RIDAC, which are really all of our customer users and our engagement manager and TCs. So this is just another way of really kind of looking how people kind of interact with the different aspects of Start Now over the different phases. So now that we've completed Module 1, let's take a look at what's next. In our next steps in the plan phase, this is really what we'll be moving into. And since you're listening to this as a pre-recorded content, when you get into class, you'll be moving directly into the plan stage of the training itself. So we are going to break the classroom into distinct groups. So your instructor will actually facilitate that process. We'll try to have someone with the engagement manager type role assigned to each team, and they're going to be the manager or the engagement manager of the team. We'll break you up into those teams. We're going to then also have each team do a kickoff meeting. So we're going to teach you a little bit. We're going to talk more about a kickoff meeting and what's involved, what should be discussed, some of the key items to be talked about during that. We'll also have you each with your own Start Now configuration. So you each will receive training instances, and you'll have a localized version of Start Now, not the centralized version on your personal sandbox that will be given out by your instructor as well. Training schedule, that's obviously you're in training, but that training scheduled is kind of a key milestone of the plan stage. This is where we want to really drive home to the customer that they need to have trained resources that we can work side by side with, because really we do not want to leave the customer high and dry at the end of the engagement. We want them to feel enabled and empowered to use ServiceNow and to be able to work within the platform. And so those customers can go to training on their own, but having the training and working during the implementation is crucial to success during and after. So, Robert, did you learn a lot?
I learned a lot. There's quite a bit of information here. You've given me quite a bit of information to think about and process here.
Yeah, I think, and yeah, definitely you shared a lot of great things as well. So let's look at a few things. I'm going to give you a couple of quiz questions. You think you can handle it?
I'm going to do my best.
All right. So what are some ServiceNow capabilities and value props?
ServiceNow capabilities and value props. So some of the capabilities of the platform are that we have multiple data centers, and those multiple shared or a couple data centers provide us with a high availability model where that if there's a catastrophic failure to a customer's instance, we're able to roll over to another environment and have backups of that as well. So we talked about the incremental backups and how those are scheduled nightly, and then we have a full backup at the end of the week. Those are kept for 28 to 30 days, I believe.
Wow, you really listened. Wow.
I did. I was taking it all in as you were talking there.
That's awesome.
And
man.
the value proposition is that we were modernizing and transforming from legacy systems that really didn't have a lot of development influence and moving into the cloud. So we have an intuitive interface. We have a common platform that spans all of our applications that provide us access and visibility into different metrics, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, single source of record, right?
Single source of record.
Yeah. So what about centralized start now? What is that built on, and who has access to that?
What is it built on? Who has access to that? So with the centralized start now, it's an application that consists of project management. It also consists of RIDAC, which was going to be some custom code there with update sets, and also what was the third part?
SDLC.
It was SDLC, the software development lifecycle. So that we're going to have a combination of a waterfall and agile approach to the product development of ServiceNow and how we're going to run our projects. So when a project is on ServiceNow paper or there is an engagement manager assigned to a project that's on partner paper, it will be driven by StartNow.
Excellent. Absolutely. Very good. Very good. What about the stages? Do you remember those stages?
The stages. There were a series of stages. Yes, I do. And if I remember correctly, you said that is remembered from PDO.
Yeah, absolutely.
PDO. So that would be the planning stage. So that's where after the pre-engagement, we move into the planning stage, and the engagement manager is planning the kickoff meeting and planning customer training where we're getting the admins trained and several other activities that are going to be coming out of the plan stage.
Absolutely. What's the next phase?
The next phase is D, or the discover phase. So this is where we're going to be delivering, or the engagement manager requirements workshops. And the requirements workshops there, we're going to do discovery again, speaking on in terms of the customer's requirements and the deltas between the baseline functionality that we have. A backlog of what are called sprints, backlog of stories.
Stories, yeah. Okay,
right, so
you answered it before. I was going to say, what do those requirements turn into? And you said it. So perfect. So that is our plan discover, and then we move into...
the plan discover. Then we move into prepare.
I wasn't going to help you out, man.
I need help sometimes.
I was going to leave you hanging there.
But the prepare stage, so in this case is where we're doing a lot of the core activities, and some of those core activities for each engagement are going to be things like bringing in our data, setting up authentication, whether that be through LDAP and or single sign-on, and setting up the instance so that we get into the next phase and we actually start doing the development work. We've got the baseline set up there.
Okay, and another key element of the prepare stage is the Scrum planning.
Right. So the Scrum planning, that's where we're going to plan out the stories and associate those with a release or a sprint.
Yeah, with the sprint.
So it'll be part of a sprint backlog, and that's going to be 1 to 4 or 2 to 4 weeks in time that are going to produce a shippable product.
Wow, man, you read it verbatim. Very good. I think you have some personal experience in there. But so that is our prepare stage. Then we move on to deploy.
Move on to the deploy stage, and within the deploy stage is where we're actually going to be doing the work that was based off of the sprints or the stories that are part of the sprint. I'll get this terminology down.
And the deploy stage is like 2 weeks, right?
The deploy stage is going to be as long as it takes.
Oh, good answer.
Right.
I thought I had you there.
Not that tired, but the deploy stage is going to be an iterative process here. So what else are we doing in the deploy stage, Glenn?
We're just we're basically building out the stories.
Building out all the fun stuff. So
and also we have the sprint retrospectives. We have the sprint reviews that are occurring. Something we didn't mention, but we do have a product called ACE.
I have a product called ACE.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that in the main presentation, but ACE is it's almost like a script that can be run from a centralized instance onto a customer instance to determine for some best practice coding.
Correct.
Best practice coding practices. So if there's any kind of business rules that are created without conditional statements, we don't want them to fire off all the time. It will actually spit out a report with all kind of suggestions on how to improve and make it more efficient in terms of coding.
Very detailed. It'll have the details of that business rule and even provide you with some context to where you can go in docs and look up that best practice or the wiki.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last phase we have is operate.
It is. The last phase is operate. Operate is when we're going to go live. Right?
Absolutely.
It's essentially, we're getting ready to cut the cake. There's going to be a go live checklist that we ensure that we're ready to hand things over to the customer, as well as support as well. So we are doing a handoff to make sure the customer is ready to engage with support, and they have finished their testing and everything has been signed off. And it's also time to get the customers trained because this is a big deal, right? So there should be some communication that goes out. Essentially a party. There should be a lot of service now.
We have those cakes,
marketing,
right?
Got cakes, T-shirts, but it's a big deal for the customer, and it's really not a big deal for ServiceNow, but the customer themselves, it's going to be a huge thing.
And we call it a non-event.
It's non-event.
Yeah. So we had a large customer where we had probably 40 resources on that project. I can't name any names for the customer. That customer, I remember the week that they went live, our TCs were waiting, for the calls to start flying in, but there was no calls. They were basically just waiting to do nothing because all the phases were done properly, and because they were so thorough in all the unit testing, the stories, and the user acceptance testing, and the fulfiller training, and it was this massive event for the customer. It was really a non-event from our side, and that's the way we like things.
I'm sure they would prefer them that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last question, I think you've already answered, but it's really asking what are what is made up in the Start Now application, and you mentioned RIDAC and Project and SDLC.
That is correct.
So with that, we hope you enjoy your implementation bootcamp training. We have some wonderful instructors that you'll be meeting. They're all over the world. And so it almost doesn't matter who you have. They're all exceptional. And so enjoy going through the phases of Start Now and working through some of the projects and exercises that we have. We have something for everyone. If you're soft skilled or if you're technical skilled, you're going to be working in all aspects. But really the takeaway at the end of this class is that you feel enabled and understand the full life cycle of how ServiceNow is implemented, and that at the very end, on the last day, you'll have an assessment to kind of test your skills. Kind of a nice way to end, to kind of see, do I really understand what I learned over the last 4 days? So with that, enjoy the implementation bootcamp. And from Robert and myself, we say thank you very much for attending.